Caitlin, welcome to the Vermillion Unplugged. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. How about you?
I'm doing. Usually I'm fine, but I don't know, like over the weekend, I feel like kind of I don't know, I can't describe it. And then today I woke up. I did go to the gym, but then at work I was like, I don't know. It's like, one of those days you're just like not feeling it.
Well, it could be that it's Monday, and it could be that it's very humid.
That is true. I didn't even think of that. And then, because also it rained, like,
Sorta.
yeah, yesterday I saw it said it was going to rain in the morning, and I didn't see anything. Then it started raining like around 10 or 11-ish.
About 11-ish last time.
And then today, it didn't say too much about rain on my weather app. And then I was at work, and I work at the med school, and I could hear the raindrops. And I'm like, is there like a storm? And then when I went out for lunch to pick up my wife, I was like, yeah, it's raining. That explains the humidity. But let's see. I want to talk about you. So what do you do?
What do I do now?
Or what did you do before?
Well, I did a lot of things. I did do a lot of things, starting at a very young age. I spent most of my working life as a private practice attorney, which simply means I wasn't employed by the government. I just was either in a law firm with other lawyers or in my own practice. And I did that for, I'd say about 33 to 35 years. If it seems like I'm not clear on that, I've tried to retire from being an attorney like 5 times over that period, and then I would start up again. But I think I am done now. So now I'm a retired person.
So what kind of practice was it?
It was very much a small town practice. I actually started practicing law in Sioux Falls after a 1-year legal position as working for the South Dakota Supreme Court. I was a legal clerk for one of the justices. So I did that for a year. Then I joined a very small firm in Sioux Falls. Did that for about 2 years. And then came back to Vermillion and opened my own office.
Oh, okay.
So with a general practice like that, it's often whatever walks in the door. A lot of criminal defense, divorce, and other kinds of family law. I also did bankruptcy, contracts, wills and trusts, all kinds of things.
Did you always want to become a lawyer?
No.
How did that happen?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you that the first thing I can remember really wanting to do was to be an architect. And my dad had bought me a Christmas present that was like these plastic girders that looked like steel girders, and you could build houses and put these plastic sheathing on the outside. Then I wanted to be a costume designer, which I think a lot of little girls go through. And then in 5th grade, I wanted to become a truck farmer.
Whoa, okay.
Truck farmer, we were living in Pennsylvania then, and in New Jersey, which we studied about, they had truck farmers who would grow fruits and vegetables, pile their trucks high, go into New York City and sell them there. I thought, that's what I want to do. I went through other phases. I started out as a physics major in college on a scholarship. Then I became a biology major, and then I got married for the first time, and somebody had to work. Turned out to be me. And that's when I ended up with a degree in political science, or as I like to say, 1 major and 5 minors. So, no, I ended up being a lawyer because I had settled on going back to school, getting my master's and PhD in poli-sci but my husband got the opportunity, his first husband, got the opportunity to teach in criminal justice at USD. He said, well, why don't you just go to law school? Which was strange because he had discouraged that previously. But that's what I did.
Oh, and how was law school? Because I know a bunch of students that are in law.
Mm-hmm.
But you know what? I always wanted to ask, like, what's it like being a lawyer? Like, from my perspective, because I don't know that many, my perspective is from like TV. I'm like, well, these people are like, have these exciting, trials, or they're living lavish and they're driving this, I don't know, Bugattis and this and that. But what's it like?
Well, it is not lavish in small town South Dakota. You probably make about as much money as somebody, teaching high school after 20 years.
Really?
It's not. Part of it has to do with if you have your own business, your own practice, you have to collect your bills. So usually try and ask people for a lot of money up front and then hope that they'll keep paying after that runs out. But people have no idea. They come in and they say, I want to get a divorce. Every time they call their lawyer, every time they ask their lawyer to do something, every time they say, well, I'm not going to agree to that, and it takes more time, it's just taking money out of their pockets. So I found practicing law to be exciting in terms of the intellectual part of it, having a problem that needed to be solved. And how would you go about doing this? Working with people was frequently very stressful and miserable because lawyers, for the most part, except for things like adoptions, see people at some of the worst points in their life. They are not happy people. They don't make anybody around them happy. So you're dealing with people who are having a very difficult point in their life. And so you're part lawyer, part counselor, trying to tell your clients, please don't do this certain thing, and here's why. Knowing that as soon as they walk out the door, they're probably going to do exactly that. Oh, okay. People pay a lot of money to lawyers to get advice and then ignore
it. How does that process? How do I explain? I guess because there's different branches.
Yes.
So what would be a good example? Like if I wanted to, no, I can't say that. Well, I'm trying to think because the only thing that I know is either like if it's like criminal, like a defense or a prosecutor, or if you're like suing someone, I think. But how does do you know like?
Yeah, so the criminal part is that the person we call the plaintiff who's starting the action is actually either the state of South Dakota, the county of Clay, the United States. They are the person who is bringing this action to say this person committed a crime. So in criminal defense, what you're trying to do is either show this person is innocent, which is not as easy as they make it seem on TV, or that the prosecution, the state, has not proved beyond a reasonable doubt the person is guilty. In civil cases where they're suing, there is the plaintiff is a person or a corporation or a company or a bunch of people, and it's the same thing with the defendant. The state is not involved in those kinds of cases. So if your neighbor decides to sue you because part of a tree in your yard fell on their house and crushed part of it, then they're the plaintiff, you're the defendant, and there are a lot more rules about what kind of evidence can be produced, the level of fault. I mean, was it an act of God? There was a big storm and this perfectly healthy tree fell over. Was it partially your fault because most of the tree was on your land, but there was one branch and your neighbor always said, "Oh, I'll take care of it myself," and never did. So maybe some of his fault. So there's books and books and books and books of all the rules.
Okay. What about with cops? Like I always heard this is where I get my legal advice from Google. I don't think I should stop.
No, yeah, stop that.
But if a cop, let's say, because I hear different things that you should answer whatever the cop is saying, but some say no, you shouldn't talk at all. But what do you think? Like, what are the best ways, or does it depend on why they're stopping you? I hear your Miranda rights or stuff like that. I'm
Sure.
completely new to this stuff.
No. It really does depend. If a Vermillion police officer stops you, comes up and says, "I think your taillight is out. Did you know that your taillight was out?" You should have a conversation with them. Maybe you didn't know. Maybe you did know, but it's 6:00, so there's no place open where you can get it fixed. You're going to try and arrange for that the next day. A lot of times they'll give you a little warning sheet that says, "Go get it fixed, bring it to me, no ticket." If an officer stops you and then is suddenly at your window with their gun drawn and pointed at you and is saying things like, "Put your hands where I can see them," you should follow their directions. And you should say as little as possible until you're at the point where you can say, "I want a lawyer present."
Okay.
It could be they just made a mistake as to your car. It could be somebody called them with bad information. But from the moment that it's serious, you need to be thinking about saying no more than you absolutely have to. Usually when you're stopped by an officer, they'll want to see identification. They'll want to see your car insurance. You should not be driving around without a driver's license. That in itself is a crime. You should not be driving around without car insurance. That in itself is a crime. So those are things where I think you see this happen a lot, on either true crime things or on television fictional shows, is the question of searches and seizures. And the law basically gives a right to law enforcement for reasonable search and seizures if they have reason to believe a crime has been committed. I mean, there has to be something. It can't be, "I looked and I saw this guy and he looked like the kind of person who would probably be carrying illegal guns in his car." Okay? That's not a good reason. I can tell you that over the years I practiced in Vermillion, I have known many, many, many law enforcement officers, both Vermillion police and Clay County sheriffs. And some of them were some of the best human beings I've ever known. They enforced the law evenly, equitably, and they also had a great well of kindness and empathy for people, some of whom they'd known all their lives, who just were never going to get their lives together. I've also known some really bad guys who were in law enforcement. Many of them did not last very long, but who took advantage of their situations, were abusive to people that they arrested, who manipulated people, sometimes sexually. So, it's like almost anything else in life. There are good people, and then there are not so good people.
Okay, so that's in like, well, yeah, that's what I was also thinking because I'll hear it. They'll say like, hey, they'll say all cops are bad, or they'll say, hey, no, you gotta trust, just trust them because they're there to protect. But there's good and bad in every field. Okay.
Well, and you have to remember that thinking as an attorney, okay? I never liked cases where I got hired after the person was arrested and then found out they have a 4-page confession that they gave to the officers. There is not very much that I can do in those situations where they say, I did it, I'm going to tell you how I did it, So if I was looking at it not as a lawyer, I would say, of course, if you did the crime, you should confess and, deal with the repercussions. As an attorney, that would not be my job.
Something that it never bothered me, but I always thought about it. If there was like a criminal, they got him, and he actually, he did do it, but they always present him with a lawyer. I always wondered why, though, if he did do it. Is that you understand what I'm trying to say? Does everyone have that equal opportunity?
Yes, but some of that opportunity is more equal than others. So if you are somebody who's very wealthy and you commit a crime and you are arrested, and even if you make statements to the police officers, very wealthy people are going to go out and hire the best criminal defense attorneys they can find, people who are absolutely expert at not only tearing through all of the evidence, but also finding ways to keep a lot of it out. People who cannot afford an attorney under constitutional decisions going back quite a few decades are allowed to ask for a court-appointed attorney. The court-appointed attorney is either an attorney in the area who has said, I will take court appointments, or they are basically a public defender. So in Clay County, we have a public defender, and he would represent most of the people who are too poor to afford their own. However, if there is more than one, maybe even more than 2 people arrested involved in the same crime, they cannot all be represented by the same attorney. So each one of them has to have an attorney. And so at least 2 of them will end up with court-appointed attorneys. People get court-appointed attorneys. The court appointments pay a lot less than what is usually the going rate per hour. But also those people will have to pay back the county for the cost of their attorney.
So what makes a criminal defense lawyer, or what makes a lawyer like a really good one, like the ones the wealthy people are getting? Because if one case is like the O.J. Simpson one, I think he did it, if I remember right, but he got off free. But
he had 2 very high-priced lawyers.
And then what did those lawyers do? If for us, I'm like, he did it. Like, it's obvious, but like, is there like a system?
It's not obvious though, because there were 2 people killed, O.J.'s wife and a young man. There were no witnesses. There was no camera. There was some evidence. There were these gloves that were seized. There were, some other things. But a lot of these attorneys do literally hundreds of cases every year. And they have a lot of staff who can help them run down any potential witness for any question in the case and find evidence that might not have been obvious. They can, they have people who can research and find cases that will uphold their motion to suppress some of the things that that law enforcement has found. So they have the time, the money, the staff to just focus on winning that case. In cities, the public defender's office will often come to kind of what the initial appearances of like a whole bunch of people have been arrested, and or maybe it's their first appearance after that. And they'll have a stack of 90 to 100 files just for that one day. You cannot possibly put in all the time. Yeah, most of those cases are going to get pled out. There'll be a plea agreement, or, something else will happen. But you're still going to be stuck with a lot of cases. Public defenders are horribly underfunded. Most of them do not have the staff or the resources, to do a lot of the investigations that need to be done on, from themselves. So they have to ask the court for, can we hire a private investigator that the state will pay for?
Okay. So it's most of it's the underfunding, kind of?
Or you could say the inequity of funding. If you have a lot of money, you have a much better chance of, if not getting away with it, having it reduced down substantially. If you are very poor, those chances, unless you are really innocent, are not good. And every day we hear about someone who has been wrongfully, found guilty and then imprisoned.
I remember something. So this was like years ago, and back in Texas. So I think it happened either to my mom's coworker or the coworker's family member. But someone got killed, and I think it was just a drunk driver, and it was like this college kid, I believe. And he killed like a few people, like he hit them, but he came out like he didn't serve any time, and what he got was they gave him a diagnosis. I don't know what it was called, but it said that he felt really bad because he was too wealthy, or he grew up some condition like that.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
wealth guilt.
yeah, something like that. And then like his punishment, like he had to go to some rehab, and it was like this beautiful spa place because I was following it, and I was like, but he killed like these people drunk.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess like I guess you have a lot of, I don't know what his dad does. He has like a lot of money, but I guess that stuff does happen. Like you could get reduced sentences or kind of change all that. Because if it was like a normal person, yeah, you're like, oh yeah, first of all, you're drinking, you kill these people, yeah, you're going to jail. But this guy, nothing happened to him.
See, one of the interesting things for me is looking at our system. We call it a system of justice in this country. It's really a system of laws. When someone has not just, had too many parking tickets, but I'm talking about a real heinous crime, a really terrible thing, and they're tried and they're convicted, what is it that society wants at that point? Did they want the person to be punished, or do they want to see if there's any chance of rehabilitation? Can this person be helped? Can they be changed? We, over the history of this country, we have never really been able to figure that out, and it tends to go back and forth. I mean, I personally know people who have gone to prison, come out, said, hey, I was young, I was stupid, I'm going on, I'm getting my life together, and, that was it. I've known other people who have basically, it was like a revolving door. They would get out of prison, maybe they'd last a week or two, and then they'd do something and they were back in prison. And over. Some of those people, that second group, the revolving door, they were mentally ill, they were addicts, or some combination of those. In other words, the types of rehabilitation that they were offered were nowhere sufficient to address the problems they had.
Okay.
So, if we had a system that was interested in punishment, we'd have a lot more prisons and a lot more jails, and we'd just stick people in there until they were deemed really too old to do anything, boot them out, or we'd kill them. If we were really interested in rehabilitation, we would put money in there. So if somebody came in, they would be really, really assessed, find out what their problems were. Can these things be worked with so this person's life can change?
And to get all that like resources, does it go through the state?
Usually, yes. I mean, the federal government has its own system of laws, including criminal laws. So this guy who was wandering around with an AK-47 at Trump's place,
Oh yeah.
he's being charged with federal offenses. He could also be charged with state crimes under the Florida laws. But he's going to get charged with a lot of stuff.
So yeah, I saw that and I thought it was a joke at first. And then I paid more attention. I was like, oh snap, did he like do that? Because, well, did they say like if he was mentally ill or he was just going after the guy?
Well, I don't think they have gotten to the point where they could make, either from the prosecutor side or the defense side, they could make a clear assessment. Apparently, former neighbors of his thought he was a little wacky, but, you know, I'm afraid that is not a professional opinion that's going to be the end point for it. I'm sure all of those things are going to be investigated very thoroughly.
Okay.
But having said that, you know, we've now had two people try and assassinate former President Trump. Neither one of them seems to have had a really good idea of what they are doing. So I guess you can either say, hooray, there are only amateurs involved in this, and between the Secret Service and the FBI, you know, their chances of being successful are not very good. Or, obviously, there's nobody sending professional assassins in to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably good, right? Because a professional would at least have a higher chance of being successful. So no professionals, you know, we can relax a little bit.
Do you think someone else will try to attack him? Or probably not.
You know, I was surprised that there was a second person who tried to do this. So now that line has been crossed, who knows? I mean, there's an old saying, and, you know, it at least goes back to biblical times, but the idea about if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. If you encourage people to be violent, if you encourage violence in the political sphere, you know, it's karmic, man. At some point, someone's going to come back. Now, maybe people will figure it out after the second time and not do anything. But I find it kind of frightening that there were two of them so far. So I'm not ready to say we won't see anymore.
It's crazy right now. A little bit.
It is very crazy.
Speaking of politics, I I saw and I heard. Well, tell me if it's true. Were you in the state legislature?
I was.
How, or because I want to ask, how was it and why did you want to do that?
Well, I will try and focus back on why I did it at the time. I've always had an interest in politics. And at the time that I ran, I was in my mid to late 30s. Both my daughters were pretty much school age by that time. And I was practicing law in a law firm. So there were other attorneys there who could cover my cases if I was gone. So I wanted to give it a try. I wanted to see if I could get into the legislature and if I could make any difference. Yes and no. As far as I know, I still hold the record for being the only legislator who was kicked off the floor of the House of Representatives on her very first day.
What'd you do?
I refused to vote. We had 2 seats in which people had ties. State law says this is how you determine a tie. And there's a procedure that's outlined in the law. I said, follow the law. The legislature shouldn't be voting on this. The 2 parties did a deal behind closed doors where it said, you guys vote for our guy on this one, the first one, and then we'll vote for your guy on the second one. So each of us get, a party person in one of these seats.
That stuff does happen?
Hell, yes, it does.
I see. I always hear like that, behind the door stuff, but I always thought it was like kind of exaggeration, but
nope. So I was mad at both parties.
Yeah.
I said, follow the law. I'm a lawyer. Follow the law. They let me sit there for the first one. On the second one, they did the roll call and I didn't vote. They said, you have to vote or you have to leave. And I said, Mr. Speaker, I will do neither. So then they sent the 105-year-old guy who was the doorman, and he walked over there, probably afraid I was going to do something. I just took his arm and we walked out of the house floor. But I didn't win any friends by doing that. But that's been my bright line in my life, is that, if this is the way that it's supposed to be done, and we're talking about laws that haven't been tampered with by one side or the other, then we follow the law. That's what the people expect, and that's what they deserve.
Yeah, that's what I would assume. If there's a process, they would be doing it, and hopefully they know more than me. But I guess some people don't. But now I didn't know that stuff happens.
South Dakota has a very, very corrupt system. And it's been, I'd say, lightly corrupt for a long, long time, decades. There's really problems happening now.
Really?
Yeah.
Do you think it will ever change? But if it's both parties, so it's not like a party issue. It's just, is it?
Well, we're after this next election in November, we'll see if there are any Democrats left in the legislature. I think last time around there were 6, maybe. And they were, so I don't know. We might have 1 or 2. But it's pretty much a one-party state.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What? Because when you ran, do you have to be affiliated with a party when you run?
No, you do not. However, I'll tell you the way that it is right now. Mm-hmm. Currently, South Dakota recognizes 3 parties: Democrat, Republican, Libertarian. However, Libertarian is kind of close because it is all based upon how many people voted for a person of that party in the last presidential election. It has to be a certain percent. if somebody is independent, we don't recognize an independent party. The law in South Dakota says it's somebody with no party affiliation, NP.
Okay. I think that's what I am when I did the voter registration, either NP or independent.
Lots and lots of people over the last 5 years, because I do a lot of voter registration work, have chosen to do no party.
Is it better to do that, or is it better to pick a party, or does it really matter?
Here's the only difference that it makes. Currently, when there is a primary, so let's say you have 3 or 4 people running to be a state representative from this district. They have a primary in the Republican Party and a primary in the Democratic Party to reduce it down to the number of actual seats there are. The Republicans only let Republicans vote in their primary.
Yeah, that I know.
Democrats let Democrats and independents, no party people, vote in theirs. There is a ballot measure coming up in November to do away with party primaries and have one primary. So top two vote getters, they're the ones that go forward.
Are you in support of
No.
that one? Oh, no. Okay. I thought it would be a good idea, so no.
Nope. The problem that they're advertising as a problem is that independents can't vote in primaries. Well, that's not true. Independents can vote in Democratic primaries. So the Republicans are the ones who are preventing independents from voting in their primary. If they really wanted to fix things, they could just remove that. Or people who really were independent and really wanted to vote in the Republican primary could change their affiliation. It's what we've been doing for a very long time.
Okay.
I asked one of the people who created this whole one primary thing, I said, okay, this seems like this will help Republicans a lot. Will it help Democrats? And he thought for a minute and he said, no. So it's not going to improve the equity across the board. And it's not really there to fix a problem for independence.
Okay. I gotta do more research on all that stuff. I'm trying to.
Well, it helps if you like to do the deep dive and you're very cynical.
Literally, we are running out of time. But before I stop this, is there any last words or anything you want to get out?
The one thing that I still believe very much in terms of law and politics, is that the only way that good, and by that I mean good for the common people and the vast majority of people, for that to happen and to prevail, requires the good people to pay attention to what's going on, vote for those who want to do good, not vote for people who are more interested in themselves and their financial situation. That's the only way we're going to solve a lot of the problems we have. If people don't do that, then I guess we're going to end up with the government that they deserve.
See what happens. No, but I do want to thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.